Chapter 11. An Irrefutable Request. This day in Ponyville had started out as most others had. The sun rose above the small town and heralded in the new dawn, the citizens once more stirring from their slumber to begin the daily grind. And now Twilight Sparkle was no exception to the village's collective routine. She got up like everyone else, went to work, ran her errands, and returned home to start the whole process over again. Day in and day out. The most variety came in the form of the different interactions had between her and the various townsfolk, namely Pinkie Pie and the social circle she was trying to get Twilight to join. And in all honesty, after living the life of a vagrant for so long, the consistency was a refreshing change of pace. Not having to worry about food or shelter every night, having a consistent schedule, not being in immediate danger of being eaten by some horrific beast. It was relaxing. At least, it was relaxing. Until last night. The visions of her encounter with the enigmatic mare in the moon were ever present in her thoughts. Even more so, the sounds of Spike's whimpering crying from his own nightmares. That horrible sound still rang in her ears. It had felt like hours before she was able to get him to calm down enough to go to sleep, and even then he had utterly refused to sleep alone. It was sheer coincidence that Fluttershy had agreed to watch Spike on this day, partly out of wishing to help, and partly out of finally unbinding his leg. If that hadn't been the plan they had agreed upon, there was absolutely no way Twilight would have come into work today. The last thing he needed right now was to be alone. But right now she had to focus on her work. And today, that work involved helping out at the Ponyville schoolhouse. Ponyville's local school, simply dubbed Ponyville Elementary, was the prime example of a typical equestrian educational facility. Large enough to accommodate for all the children in Ponyville, more or less. Depending on the exact year, the establishment specialized in the basic academic necessities. Reading, writing, mathematics, history, social studies, music, physical education, basic magic classes for unicorns, and basic flight classes for Pegasi. Ponyville Elementary, in spite of its rather bland name, also had accommodations to act as a daycare center for the exceptionally young and had higher educational proceedings for those who were past the elementary stage. Now, granted, these three factions were technically held in separate buildings, but they were all within the same fenced-off patch of land, and faculty from any were viable to migrate to the others if the need should arise. Which was a situation eerily similar to the one Twilight found herself in today. As an employee of the Golden Oaks Library, Twilight was also technically part of the educational department, meaning she was viable to be asked to help out at the school should the need arise. And today, the need had arisen.
And then you carry the 6.
Twilight concluded as she returned the pencil to the filly.
So, the answer must be...
She trailed off, hoping the younger pony would pick up on the hint. The young unicorn sat there for a moment, puzzled at the question even after the assistance she had received.
11? That's right! Yes!
The young unicorn quickly jotted down the answer as she celebrated her achievement, even if Twilight had helped her a great deal.
All right, now try the next one on your own. It's the same basic idea, just different numbers. Okay then, thanks Twilight.
The filly scooped up her assignment and returned to her desk with a smile, leaving Twilight once more alone at the small table she had been stationed at. Today, this particular batch of students was being introduced to long division, hence why the disguised alicorn had been requested to help out as something akin to a teacher's assistant. And it had been a busy day, that filly being the most recent in a long series of students who had been having trouble with the new material. In fact, Twilight had gotten more requests for help than the actual teacher. Not that the teacher wasn't knowledgeable about the subject matter, she wouldn't be a teacher if she wasn't, but Twilight seems to be better at getting the message across to the young crowd than she was, which was without question due to her past experiences with Spike. When you can teach a dragon how to use a toilet, you can effectively teach anyone to do anything. The only difference between these ponies and Spike, aside from age and species, was that she couldn't reward correct answers with peppers. The sudden and prominent chime of the school's bell tower prompted a powerful reaction from the students. Much more rambunctious and rowdy an uprising than when the other classes had been dismissed. They were far more eager and enthusiastic than the other children had been for whatever reason, their motivation becoming clear to Twilight as the teacher called out over the sudden commotion.
I'll see you all tomorrow, and remember to study. There will be a test at the end of the week.
That made sense. The young minds were eager for a chance to catch their breaths, and frankly, so was Twilight. Time really did fly when one kept busy, it seems. And now, Twilight had a bit of time to herself. And realizing that, she began to tidy up the workspace she had been given use of.
Excuse me, Miss Sparkle?
The teacher, cheerily, asked out of nowhere, forcefully snapping Twilight back to reality. The older, dark magenta mare offered her a kind and impressed smile before continuing.
Thank you so much for your help this far. If I may say, you're quite the natural when it comes to teaching. And the kids are actually understanding the material in record time thanks to you. I'm impressed. Oh, well, I've had some experience tutoring in the past.
Twilight explained with a slight chuckle.
I was asked to help out a lot back in my school days. Well, you've certainly got a knack for this. If you ever decide to go full-time, I'd be willing to put in a good word for you.
The teacher's smile only grew as she began to leave the room ahead of Twilight.
Career options. Not bad, Sparkle.
The alicorn congratulated herself as she continued her self-appointed cleaning task. It wasn't an option that she had any plans of taking up, but the thought that the professional educator had put in the offer was a nice sentiment, if nothing else. But Spike was due for another checkup with the shy nurse in another couple of days, and hopefully, he will have made a full recovery by then. After that, there wouldn't really be much of a reason to stay in Ponyville outside of simple leisure. Currently, the agreed-upon plan with the Long Dragon was to stay until after the Summer Sun celebration towards the end of June, just to give them enough time to fully recover from their weary travels and to build up their savings to a comfortable level. Besides, resuming their voyage at such a time felt right, new beginnings and all of that.
Maybe then I'll have burned up all this bad luck.
Twilight chuckled to herself, thinking back on the encounters with the dragon and the Timberwolves. The mistakes she had made leading up to those incidents still burned at the back of her head, taunting her with her own failures and shortcomings. But these were not thoughts to have right now, and Twilight didn't want to be worrying about that at the moment. But as she returned her attention to the classroom's only exit, she found herself trapped by 3 fillies. 3 fillies that she had been acquainted with over the day so far. Apple Bloom, the yellowish earth pony with a bright red mane and brighter red bow that was almost larger than her head. Sweetie Belle, the white and pink unicorn who was evidently Rarity's sister. And finally Scootaloo, an orange and dark purple Pegasus who, for one reason or another, gave Twilight the strangest sense of déjà vu, though for the life of her she couldn't put her hoof on it. Each of them had their saddlebags worn and ready as if to take their trips home, seemingly waiting for her. But Twilight knew the trio for a different reason. When she had arrived at the school, she had received a warning that these 3 were something of a group of troublemakers. They weren't exactly bad kids, but on the occasion when an incident did occur, they were usually involved in some way, malicious intent or not. She had also been reassured that these incidents were few and far between, but it was better for her to be aware. For her own safety, the teacher who had warned her explained.
Howdy, Twilight.
Applebloom spoke up first, her country accent still as prevalent as ever.
How's it hanging, Teach?
Scootaloo added with an upward jut of her chin. That gesture reminded Twilight of something, but she wrote it off as perhaps having seen it before. It wasn't exactly an uncommon gesture, after all.
Oh, hello, you 3.
Twilight muttered back.
How can I help you? If you're not busy, would you mind helping us out with something?
Sweetie Belle's horn ignited with green light, a book removing itself from the confines of one of her saddlebags and being offered to Twilight.
It's really important.
Twilight took the book in her grip and gave it a look over. It was from a series of children's history books that detailed the kinds of tools and weapons that had been used by Equestria during its two greatest wars, the Great Shadow War and the Equestrian-Ciaran War. This volume in the set was all about various siege weapons that had been invented in that time period. Though, of course, the book didn't answer the question of what the three ponies wanted Twilight to help them with, and thus the obvious question came to be.
What exactly are you wanting me to help you with? School project. It's a secret. Nothing illegal.
The three fillies answered simultaneously, without a moment's hesitation. Scootaloo's answer, in particular, caught Twilight's attention, and the attention of her two friends. The three comrades withdrew from the conversation with the librarian for a moment to huddle and talk amongst themselves. Based on the intensity with which they were whispering, it was very heated and very quick. Before Twilight could make out any specifics, the three fillies returned their attention to her with bright, happy expressions.
We're working on a school project,
Sweetie Belle explained as she withdrew another item from her bag, this time a piece of paper clearly outlining a school assignment.
We are supposed to build a simple machine to demonstrate to the class, but we want to do something cool,
Applebloom added, as if she were trying to sell something.
And then we found this book at the library and decided we wanted to build something from it. So we're building a trebuchet,
Scootaloo concluded. The confident look on her face was suddenly overcome by a brief and unsubtle flash of panic.
A model trebuchet, small enough to fit on a desk so it isn't illegal.
The breach of the facade earned the young Pegasus a swift and subtle kick from Sweetie Belle, whose expression remained the same while in the act. And after getting over the brief moment of pain, Scootaloo's expression returned to the same innocent smile that the others had.
You three are terrible liars,
Twilight observed as she overlooked the document. As the three had claimed, it was indeed a school assignment. The students were to construct a working miniature machine with some functional purpose by the end of the week. Everything else looked to be in order, from the teacher's signature to a small list of basic suggestions to get the mind flowing.
Wait a second. This says it has to have a functional purpose,
Twilight pointed out, showing the three students what she was talking about.
What possible function could a tiny trebuchet have? Have you ever wanted to throw something away?
Scootaloo pointed towards the trash bin on the other side of the room.
But the trash can was all the way over there?
Twilight honestly didn't know what she had been expecting for an answer. In fact, she wasn't sure she was expecting an answer at all, but there it was, presented to her plain as day, just as she had requested. Everything about this seemed a bit sketchy, to say the least. These three clearly had ulterior motives outside of the school assignment. Scootaloo's testimony alone was enough to poke a few holes in their case. But at the same time, they were asking for help on a school project, and Twilight couldn't just turn a blind eye to three eager young minds who wanted to pass an assignment, even if they were clearly up to something. But honestly, what harm could a model trebuchet actually cause?
Are you three free after school? Heck yeah, we are,
Applebloom answered swiftly, two enthusiastic nods following from her comrades.
All right then, meet me at Golden Oaks and we'll see what we can do.
The rest of the school day seemed to fly by like nothing after that. Twilight continued to help out in that particular math class, making sure that each student who asked got enough help to at least figure out the basic processes of what was being taught. It wasn't all that bad, if the Alicorn were being honest. It was just time-consuming. But now the school day was over, and Twilight was allowed to return to her actual place of employment. Warm sunlight fell upon her hard and fast as she stepped back into the outside world, a familiar sensation that brought a multitude of good memories to surface. Of course, she didn't really have time to bask in those memories at the moment. She had a prior arrangement to fulfill. And it seemed that the three excitable fillies were eager to keep the Alicorn to her word. For just as they had done earlier in the day, they tracked her down and cornered Twilight at the earliest possible convenience. And she wasn't sure she should have been impressed by their eagerness to complete their assignment, or worried about the intensity with which they were pushing it. But it did give Twilight an experience that would one day become a funny story to tell. As the group exited the school in destination for the library, The trio of young ponies had Twilight surrounded on all sides in a triangular formation. Her own little entourage, escorting her back to her place of employment. Twilight found it adorable, and that was likely helped by the fact that they weren't even aware of what their actions implied. Or maybe they were just trying to make sure that she didn't ditch them. That was probably the more likely answer, really. Regardless, onward they marched, through Ponyville, taking the most direct route to the Golden Oaks. Through the marketplace. Bustling and lively as ever, the congregation went widely unnoticed by the masses as they all went about their business. Though Twilight and company were noticed by one of the merchants. The Alicorn seeing the pony's sudden and worried approach just out of the corner of her eye. Standing at almost a whole head taller than Twilight, a whole head taller if you counted her well-worn Stetson hat sitting atop her dirty blonde mane, was an earthy orange earth pony. She didn't only have a height advantage over Twilight either. She had the physical physique of a pony who had been working their entire life. And given that she had just bolted out of the apple stand, saying she was a farmer of some description was probably a safe bet. And as Twilight turned her head to fully see the approaching mare, she saw two emerald green eyes filled to the brim with haste, anxiety, and the smallest twinge of anger.
Apple Bloom, what did we tell y'all about kidnapping?
The interloper scolded, aiming her ire at the younger earth pony who had been leading the caravan. She stood her ground before the younger pony, bringing the group to a swift halt. The younger two ponies passing Twilight to join their friend in the confrontation with this new arrival.
Okay, first of all, we weren't kidnapping them.
Apple Bloom defended with a dismissive wave of her hoof.
And second, we aren't kidnapping her. Has this happened before?
Twilight asked, suddenly regretting the choices she had made that led her into this situation.
Yeah, we were going to the library to work on our project. Honest.
Sweetie Belle added to further their argument.
Which isn't illegal.
Scootaloo also mentioned, earning her another subtle kick, this time from Apple Bloom.
What? It isn't.
Still uncertain, Applejack looked up to Twilight with a raised brow in search of answers. This true?
I don't see why it wouldn't be. I was asked to help them with an assignment.
Twilight rebutted with a raised eyebrow of her own.
All right, then.
The farmer didn't exactly sound convinced, evidently just as suspicious of the three fillies as Twilight had been, but she was satisfied enough to let them be on their way. The three fillies rushed by the moment the path had been cleared without a care in the world. Though as Twilight went to follow them, she was stopped by the orange mare once again.
Hey, do I know you from somewhere? You seem familiar.
Twilight smiled for the first time in this whole conversation.
10-Bit says it's because of Pinkie Pie.
Sudden realization washed over Applejack like a wave.
Oh, you're that adventurer pony.
That smile was quick to turn into a deadpan grimace.
Traveler. I'm a traveler. Well, it's nice to finally meet you. Always good to meet one of Pinkie's pals.
Applejack beamed.
Last I heard, you were looking for a job. Guess you found one at the school, huh? If we're being specific, I work at the library. They just had me help out at the...
Twilight began to explain, but she found herself trailing off to a stop when she caught sight of Applejack's reaction. She had gone pale in the brief period of time Twilight had been talking, wide, dilated eyes locked firmly onto her. Her mouth was left slightly ajar, struck in a perpetual silent gasp. There was something else behind the surprise and shock. Something bitter. Something angry.
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Applejack was quick to shake herself out of her stupor, though a look of obvious worry was still plastered on her face.
But, be careful around Old Man Onwood.
That got Twilight's attention.
Why's that? Twilight!
Apple Bloom interrupted at the worst possible time, running back up with her friends.
Where'd you go? I thought you were gonna help us.
I'll tell you later, Applejack answered, turning to the currently abandoned stall she had left behind and leaving Twilight with a number of questions burning to be answered. Though there was no way that they'd be answered right now, not with Applejack returning to her job and with 3 anxious fillies tugging at Twilight's cloak to get her to hurry up. The only thing to be done was to just go on ahead and fulfill the promise she had made earlier this day. 2 weeks had already passed and Twilight had yet to notice anything odd of the Sorosian thus far, so who knew? Maybe it was nothing at all.
But what if there is something wrong?
She mused for but a moment. After all, this hadn't been the first time someone had reacted this way after learning of her employer.